Thank you, Jason. Where'd Julia go? I thought she was gonna say 40 liters under 40. Because I just came out. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce to you someone who was originally from suburban Chicago, Kurt Pegler. He first walked through the doors of WMBD 31 as a college intern from ISU in 1987. 3 years later, he was hired as a full-time reporter. Through the years, Kurt's covered the Major League Baseball postseason, NCAA Final Four, PGA, LPGA, NFL, NBA, and NHL games, along with NASCAR races. He still contends his favorite assignments include reporting stories that are here locally with local prep, college, and professional athletes that are here from Central Illinois. He's been a finalist in the Best Downstate Sportscast Award presented by the Illinois Broadcaster Association every year since 1993, and he won the honor in 94, 03, and 04. He's very active in our community. He serves on the Greater Peoria YMCA board, the Peoria Leadership Prayer Breakfast, the Area Operation Christmas Child Committee. He has also co-hosted the Muscular Dystrophy Association and Easter Seal telethons for WMBD TV. He's a regular MC at local charity golf events and awards luncheons, and we're just so honored to have him here to speak with us today. He's, of course, an avid golfer, still searching for his first hole in one. I tried to see if he was, lean more towards the Cubs, but he mentioned those White Sox. So Jason, you and I can still have competition with him. Please help me welcome Kurt Pegler.
Wow, well, thank you, Jim. That was a great introduction. Now I know why there's a lot of people here. I know people said, why are so many people here? Well, when you have great food and great people, and I think that maybe they came to see Scurry, as a new member. So, that's good. Now, I will say this: if you're going to go to the ballpark for the first time, if they ask you to do the dizzy bat race tonight, no, do not do that tonight. Do not go out there in the field and do that. But anyway, thanks for the invitation. I've spoken at Rotary groups before, and I love what this organization does. In fact, I thought you might not have me till wintertime, because the last time I spoke, they said it'll be a cold day when we have Pegler come back and talk about it. And of course, it's the hottest day of the year. So I just thought what I would do is give a little background of what I do, and then open it up for questions, because inevitably, usually the way this works is, I could be talking about ABC, and people are like, why didn't he talk about X, Y, and Z? So I'd rather have you guys, excuse me, just feed me the questions that you've been thinking about, and I'll be happy to answer them. But as Jim said, I first walked into the doors at WMBD back in 1987. Some days my first day seems like it was last week. Most days it feels like it was 187 years ago, as far as the changes are concerned that we've had, and our industry has changed so much. In fact, I tell people this all the time. Do you have any idea how much news we did when I first started back 7 years ago? Do you know roughly how many minutes a day of news we did? Any guesses?
30.
30, a little bit more than that.
60.
60, just a little bit more than that. 90. We did 90 minutes of news for the entire day. We had 30 minutes at 6, 30 minutes at 10. We had a noon show, 30 minutes. Any idea how much news we do nowadays?
I know.
Yeah.
17. 24.
We do 8 hours, 8.5 now, right? 8.5 hours of news in one day. That was like a week when I first started. So obviously our industry has changed quite a bit. The internet has changed the way people consume news. I mean, it used to be that when something happened at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you went out and you covered it, and you hoped that your competition didn't have it, because you saved it for the 5 or the 6 o'clock news. Now when it happens at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, at like 3:03, it's on your web page and it's on your Facebook page, and all that kind of stuff. And people are consuming their news a lot differently than they did back then. But it's still a wonderful job. I love coming and speaking, because when I'm talking to a camera at night, I'm not sure, is there anybody on the other side that's watching me, and when people say, you put me to bed every night, I don't know how to quite take that, but it's nice to have faces to see, and I enjoy, as Jim had mentioned in that bio. Yeah, I've covered the World Series before, the Final Four, and all that. But I really get more of a kick out of doing the local having the relationships with the coaches and the players and telling local stories as opposed to, going to a PGA Tour event and just being one of 50 reporters there that are sticking a microphone in to talk to somebody. It's just kind of it's big and it's sanitized when you get to those big events, whereas, when you can do something a little more local and share those stories, those are the stories that I like. So I'm on the 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and 10 o'clock news. That's when you'll see me. And of course, we do news, like I said, 8.5 hours, we do news every day, around the clock, essentially. But you won't see me, doing my sports at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I tape something at night at 10:30, which runs during the morning show, because I've frequently people have asked me, they've said, I saw you do a sportscast at 6:30 in the morning, and then you were still there at 10:30 at night. What kind of hours do you leave? Well, that's recorded. The night after the 10 o'clock news, we record a 1-minute sportscast for the morning shows that they can run. So that's just kind of a little insight of what I do. I work kind of a second shift, like 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the afternoons, typically when I go in, because I'm on those later shows. And obviously in sports, most of our stuff happens in the afternoon and in the evening as opposed to 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the morning. Every now and again, we have morning type assignments, but for the most part, my stuff happens in the afternoon and the evening on the sports schedule. And so it's wonderful. It's great to be at sporting events. It's great to be talking to people and doing feature stories, which I kind of love to do. In fact, some of the people will ask me about memorable moments and what's your most memorable moment, this and that, and a lot of them might be games. I mean, the first kind of championship team that I covered when I came here was that 1990-91 Riverman team. That was incredible. It had like 19 guys that went on to the NHL, and they won 18 games in a row, and they were kind of a national sensation before viral things became a sensation. I mean, Canadian television was down here doing stuff with those guys because everybody knew what they were doing. You never forget that. I'll never forget in 1990, I guess it was 6, when the Bulls came here and played an exhibition game. That was the first game that Dennis Rodman, Scottie Pippen, and Michael Jordan were all together because it was their first exhibition game that year. That was the team that won 72 games, and they played at the Civic Center. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't remember much from the game because it was just an exhibition game. I know they played Cleveland, and I know they won. But I just remember an hour before the game when the Bulls bus pulled up and they came out and people were screaming it was like the 1964, when you see that footage of the Beatles at Shea Stadium when they played for like 10 minutes because everybody was just screaming, and that's what it was. It was a rock concert. Those guys showed up and they played a game, and it was more of an event than it was a game. Like I don't even remember the score, but it was just an event. And so we've been lucky enough to have events like that in Peoria. And of course, we've had people like Jim Tomey and Sean Livingston and Ben Zobrist, all these really great people that called Central Illinois home that have been great to cover and be around, and they're all like your next door neighbor. These are wonderful people that are as genuine as you would think your next door neighbor would be. And so that's another reason why, Central Illinois sports is so much fun to cover. And then when those guys achieve so much, one guy's in the Hall of Fame and the other guy's winning NBA championships, and one guy was the World Series MVP, and you're like, yeah, that guy could be my next door neighbor. He's from Eureka. It's just kind of neat to see that. So, all right, so that's kind of a little bit of a background of what I do and kind of my hours and that kind of stuff. So I thought at this point, because I know you guys, I want to be a good steward of your time here, I will open the floor for questions, and I will try to answer them the best I can. Now, I will say this is the first time that I've ever spoken with my station manager in the audience, so might have to be a little delicate on how he answers some questions. And I don't know the answer to why severe weather always happens during Wheel of Fortune. Okay, so I know people watch Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy like crazy, and why do tornadoes and severe weather always happens in preempts that I don't know. But, okay, questions.
2 questions. Number 1, can you tell us some dirt on your general manager? 1. Oh, let's put that one aside for now. The real question, really impressed with the local coverage of high school sports in this area. And frankly, that's for both the stations. My daughter is a varsity volleyball player at Morton, and I saw you there just the other night covering that. How do you determine how much time you have and which schools you cover on a given evening? Because sometimes it's really impressive the number of short snippet highlights that you have from the different schools. So how does that work?
That's great, thank you. Is your daughter or your granddaughter?
My daughter.
Okay.
My granddaughter.
Scratch that for the record.
I am never going to live that
Yeah,
down.
no. I'm sorry, because Brock Hessing was up talking to me about his granddaughter, so that's the reason why I covered her too. So scratch that for the record. That's a good question. How much time do you think Kurt Pegler gets to do sports at 6 o'clock when he goes on? It's a half an hour show. How much time do you think I get?
Five
Scott, no,
minutes.
Scott Paulson knows 3. I get 3 minutes. I get a whopping 3.5 at 10. 3.5 minutes. I get 30 seconds more. So the question a lot of times is, what makes the sportscast and what doesn't make the sportscast, based on what can I put in 3.5 minutes? And so a lot of it has to do with what the personnel is. It's just a 2-person sports department. It's just myself and Patrick Cunningham, who's my weekend guy. We have a part-timer that works out of our Bloomington newsroom that shoots some video for us. But essentially, it's just us covering 10 counties, 40 high schools, 5 colleges, 3 pro teams, that kind of stuff. And so what can we get to? What are the right matchups? What are the most appealing games? We try to figure out where are people interested in, if you have a ranked team, that kind of stuff. And then it's can you get to the games and can you get it back to the 10 o'clock news? It's a little bit different on a Tuesday or a Wednesday or Thursday when you're covering soccer and volleyball, as opposed to a Friday night when you're covering football. Tomorrow night will be the kickoff to the high school football season, and we're hoping to have like 17 or 18 games of highlights. We do an 11 o'clock show on Friday nights on our WYZZR Fox affiliate, that's all high school football on Friday nights during the regular season. So we have a little bit more time then. And on Friday nights, we have what we call Sports Extra, where it's a longer sportscast. We've got about 7.5 minutes as opposed to the 3.5 minutes that I typically get. But a lot of times it's just, can I get to a game? What time is the game going to start? And are there games next to each other? For example, if Tremont and Morton are both at home, that's kind of easy for me to get to 2 games. If Tremont, Morton, and DMAC are home, because those are all really close, I might be able to get to 3 games. But if one game's playing in Galesburg and one game's in El Paso, I probably can only get to one of those 2, and you got to make a decision on what gets in and what gets out. But it's a constant battle every day of what can I get in, because I want to get the most that I can in and tell the right stories. And obviously, there's some nights where you just can't get everything in. And so if I say, for example, I can't get to Morton tonight, but they're home again on Thursday, maybe I can get to Morton on Thursday, that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Hi, thank you first of all so much for coming. And I just had a quick question for you about the industry. I know you had talked earlier about you only did so much news in the beginning and now you're doing like a whole week's worth. How has social media with all the streaming affected your business?
Well, I think people aren't waiting until 6 o'clock and 10 o'clock anymore to get their news. Like I said, you have it on your phone. I think more people are consuming news this way than they are the old way of sitting in front on the couch and watching the news. And I mean, I still love it when people say, I watch you at 10 o'clock every night. That's great, but I think more people now are on their computer screens, and if you hear something's happening at 2:30 in the afternoon, you're probably going to your phone or to your computer to check on the news on the website and all that kind of stuff. So the news cycle is just, it never ends, and I think in some ways, and industry experts will tell you, how many people are watching the news and how many people are now streaming. I mean, the primetime television is changing completely because of Netflix, and people are doing that kind of thing. And they're getting their news, again, in different ways. And Facebook, people are putting stories on Facebook. Is it true? Is it not? I've got a Facebook page too. I try to post my stuff on Facebook because I know sometimes people that aren't up at 10 o'clock at night, they're looking at their Facebook page first thing in the morning to see what happened last night, the Morton volleyball highlights or whatever else we can get. So that can be a good thing, but it also can be a bad thing because it's pulling people away sometimes from your newscast. So it's kind of it's one leads to the other, but it has changed the way like I said, we do things, and the streaming thing from a sports standpoint. We on Friday nights we partner with Clutch Sports Media, which is a streaming system, and they stream high school football and basketball games, and we carry those on our Friday night. So now. And that was one of the good things that happened in the pandemic was school districts have started figuring, you know what, we can't go to the games. We're not allowed to go to the games. They've said we can't go to the games. Let's put a camera in the gym and shoot the games and then stream it. So you can watch the game without going because we couldn't go into those gyms. And grandma and grandpa that live in Florida can now see their granddaughter play volleyball or their grandson play football because there's streaming games. And we're carrying some of that on our web too. So that's changing, and that might be the new wave of the future are those kind of things. Because now you've got production houses and stuff like that are, used to be, it was only network television that did that kind of stuff. Now there's a lot of options out there where you can get your information, and the streaming thing is a big deal. I hope that answers your question.
Kurt,
Yes.
what's your favorite memory and what did you learn most by living at Tri-Towers and going to Illinois State University?
All right, so Scott says he's got to take fun pills now, but like 30 years ago, he was a fun guy in college, so I don't know what happened there. But I went to Illinois State, and they've got a great, they really have a great mass communications program. And I was on the radio there. I did play-by-play. They've got a nightly newscast, student run, and that was my lab. Just like student teaching or a chemistry lab for a chemistry major, that was my lab. And you make mistakes, and you do that kind of stuff, and that's how you learn. And it was a wonderful experience. I got a chance. Michael Jordan came down. That's when Doug Collins is an Illinois State grad, and when Doug was coaching the Bulls, he brought Michael down for an event, and it was a crazy, he was like this 23-year-old Michael Jordan, really super young, and he played an exhibition game. He's dunking on people, it was just kind of fun. But, I got a chance to meet him. I got a chance to meet Doug Collins and stuff like that when you're in college, that kind of stuff. And it was just fun. Those were fun days. And I think it prepared me well. I did an internship through Illinois State at WMBD, and then I was hired after my internship, like I said, 300 years ago. And I'm still here. So I didn't know if I would still be here, but Peoria's been so great, and it's a wonderful sports market. Halfway between Chicago and St. Louis, you have your, Cub fans, Cardinals fans, Bulls fans, Blues fans, Blackhawks fans, all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, the local sports is so good. Our high school sports and our college sports are so good. It's great to be able to do that. So, but it started when I was involved in the radio and TV stuff at Illinois State. Okay. Jason's got a question. This will be hard.
I was going to ask you who your favorite general manager of balls of all time was, but I won't do that. Now, if you had to pick a sport, what's your favorite sport to cover? It doesn't have to be baseball.
I know. I always say it's sometimes it's the sport where I can get in and out quickly. Right. So sometimes it's easier to cover a volleyball game or a basketball game than it is to cover a soccer game, because I might be at a soccer game for an hour and it's 0-0. I got to stay a little bit longer. I'm like, will somebody please score here? When you're on deadline, you start thinking about those kind of things. But I was always a baseball guy growing up. In fact, I wanted to play baseball. I was a high school baseball player, and it was kind of when I didn't make the varsity team was when I was in a journalism class. And I'll never forget this. The journalism teacher about the second week of class asked me to stay after class, and I thought, okay, what did I do wrong now? And she said, I like your writing samples, and I'm the faculty advisor for the student newspaper. Would you consider being a part of our newspaper staff? We're short on some sports reporters. And the rest is history. So I was on the newspaper staff because my baseball career ended when I was a junior in high school, and I became the sports editor of that. And I know some schools now have radio stations in their high schools, and they're doing TV stuff. We just had newspapers back then, and it was great. But baseball was probably growing up. I played baseball and hockey. So I played baseball in the spring and summer, and hockey in the fall and winter. Those were kind of my two sports. Although I loved just about everything, but those were my two sports. So I kind of veered towards those. But it's kind of fun to do disc golf that's in town. Stuff like that you just never think of, and it's kind of nice to have. One of the great things about my job is it changes every couple of months. I have summer sports now, and fall sports are starting up, and in a couple of months I'll be doing winter sports, and then I'll be back to spring sports, and so it's kind of nice, to do all that kind of things. But there's a lot of times where I'm looking at my watch going, will somebody please score so I can go? So that's usually my favorite sport, is when I can get in and out.
So I've got a question that I know the answer to, but I think it'd be cool for everybody to hear. So starting tomorrow starts the craziest 9 weeks of Kurt's life every year when high school football starts up and there's all those games. And he mentioned he gets extra time. They do a half-hour show and all that stuff. Can you just kind of explain to everybody the process that you go through on a Friday night to get all of that stuff on the air that they see that goes by so quick when you're watching it, but it's not really that quick to put it all together?
We started thinking about tomorrow's games like 2 weeks ago. Get the schedule. Again, what games can you get to? Is Tremont home? Is Morton home? One person can cover both. Tomorrow night, Peoria High is home and Notre Dame is home. They play a mile apart. That's great. We can get to 2 of those games. Can you get to a third? When Metamora and Washington are home, when Tremont and DMAC are home, when games are close, Normal West and Normal U-High are like a mile and a half apart. Great. When they're both home at the same time, you can get to 2 games without too much trouble. But honestly, the whole success sometimes on a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night when you're doing soccer or volleyball, or on a Friday night, the whole thing is the planning of, can you get to games? Who's going to get to games? What time are you going to get to games? We try, for example, and I love the band and I love what happens at halftime of a game, but my goal is not to have to sit through halftime, right? I try to get to a game and get out before halftime and get to the next game that's at halftime when I'm driving. And then when I get there, they've just finished halftime, so the third quarter is going to start. Only because, not because I don't want to hear the band play, not because I don't want to see the dance team do its thing. It's all about timing. When can you get to games? How much can you get? So there's a lot of that planning on, and some of it's out of our hands. Like, for example, just today, they've already moved a couple of games because of the heat tomorrow from 7 to 8 o'clock. That doesn't sound like a lot, but you just took an hour out of my work, out of our workflow. And that becomes an issue, because now when I go on at 10 o'clock, maybe those 8 o'clock games won't even be over. So these are things that Kurt loses sleep over. And so the whole Friday night thing begins with that. We have 6 photographers that'll be in the field trying to safely get to games and get highlights, get back in time, get them edited, get the names right on TV. And I'm sometimes wrong with that, and sometimes I hear, from somebody after the news, it's Cade Hessing, not Ken Hessing. Okay, I got his name wrong, or something like that. But most people are nice about that. But you want to get that right too. So there's a lot that goes into Friday nights. And then, we do, on Friday nights, we have our Sports Extra show, which starts at about 10:23 and goes until about 10:33. And then during the 9 weeks of the football season, we turn around and do a half an hour on WYZZ at 11 o'clock. And that's live, and that's all highlights, and we've got interviews and all that kind of stuff. So that 27 minutes between 10:33 and 11 o'clock is like that, when you're trying to make sure that all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted, the scores are right and the names are right and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of work, and there's no way one person can do it. I'm thankful that I've got a team. We got, of course, directors and producers, all those people behind the scenes that are trying to make that work. You're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot going on underneath the surface to make that work. But it's a lot. But it beats sitting through a council meeting. It's a better assignment than going to a county board meeting. And I don't, and if there's county board members here, I'm just saying. When I first started, I was a part-timer. When I first started, I started in news. When I first got hired, I did my internship. And my news director said, I don't have a position for you in sports. I do have a part-time news position. Would you take it? It's 3 nights a week. Of course, I took it. And I was covering county board and school board and this flea market and that flea market and this blood drive. And, I met people, and it was great. And actually, sometimes when I had to sit through court cases, because now there's so much sports and court cases go left and right, it was nice to kind of learn the judicial system. But if you're asking me, would I rather be at a volleyball game or a county board meeting? What's the next question?
I've got 2 for you.
Yeah.
It seems to me years ago, and you can tell me, you used to come in with a camera person.
Right. Uh-huh.
And then somehow you've got away from that. Your counterpart at the other station has all good close-ups of his face, it seems like, when he's holding that camera himself, I think. And so that was some adjustment. Maybe you could speak to that. And then secondly, it seems like sportscasters, sports directors, weathermen stick around. I don't know if it's our community. We're so lucky for that. You've been here forever. Others, but it seems to be sports and weather stay in a community.
Yeah, both good questions. Usually in our line of work, there's 200 and some odd television markets in the country. And it's based on size, based on the number of people you can reach, based on the number of eyeballs you have. So like the New York is number one, LA is number two, Chicago's number three, all big, big, big cities. And those TV stations are on the high end of pay scales and, again, how many people you can reach. And Peoria's market 120, okay? So we're kind of in the middle. So what happens is most people come here and they get 2 years experience, 3 years experience, and they're looking to move up. They're looking to move to Tulsa, maybe in market 70, and then go to Grand Rapids, market 30, because they want to eventually get to Houston, which is market 4 or something like that. And that's what you have to do. When I was in college, my college roommate could start in Chicago. I couldn't start in Chicago in my job. If my college roommate's in computer science, he can get a job in Chicago and live downtown and go to ball games and see Springsteen when Springsteen plays at Soldier Field. Now I'm like, I'm going to be in Peoria. Now that doesn't sound so good until you look at our market, and from a sports standpoint, it's a great market. I have people that are envious that my job changes every 3 months and that I'm not just covering one team all the time. But that's why people come and go. That's why you see somebody on the air for 2 years and then they're gone and they've moved on because maybe they're from Denver and Peoria's their first place starting and they want to get to Denver. And so they got to go from here to Milwaukee and Milwaukee to Denver or something like that. They got to get to a bigger market and get the experience and because you can't start there. And then I think it's easy to kind of fall in love with Central Illinois after a while. I didn't think I'd still be here. I mean, if you'd have asked me back in 1987, but you start realizing how good you have it and you start realizing how good, from a sports standpoint, it's just wonderful. It really is. Now, your first question, yes, things have changed. When I first came, we had a newsroom full of people that just were photographers, just were reporters, just were anchors. Now you have to wear all of those hats. I shoot my own video, I report, I anchor, and then I post it on the web. I mean, I'm pretty much wearing about 4 or 5 hats. You have an assignment editor that sometimes comes up with the assignments and works with the reporters. You're going to do this, you're going to do that. I'm my own assignment editor. I have to know that there's 18 games. I have to know that Morton's playing Normal West in a volleyball game tonight, and that's a big game. I got to be there. Nobody's telling me that from the assignment desk. I'm my own assignment desk. Then I go to my locker and I get my camera and I go out to the game and I shoot the game. And then I come back and I edit the game. Now, 30 years ago, that was 3 different people. Now it's 1 person. And I know that people at the bank can tell me that they have to wear 4 hats. People at the health club now can tell me that they have to wear 4 hats. Everybody has to do that. At the hospital, they're wearing 4 hats. And certainly in television, we're wearing multiple hats. And so, yes, I'm writing my own stuff. I'm reading my own stuff. I'm anchoring, I'm reporting, and then posting it. And like I said, now in some markets, in market 3, that's not happening. When I go up there to Chicago to do a story, if I go to Chicago Bears training camp and I'm carrying my own camera and I'm doing the interviews myself, and I look over at the NBC, the ABC, the CBS, and the Fox from Chicago, they've got like 3 people. They've got a photographer, they might have a producer with them, and they've got the reporter. So, but not in market 120. Yeah.
So because all of these high school sports are streaming,
Yes.
why don't you just use clips from the stream rather than going to all these different locations?
We can. That's a good question. We can. In some instances, we have if the quality of the broadcast is good. Some of them are just a camera mounted at the top of the bleachers, way up there, shooting really wide stuff. And sometimes you can't see the play. You can't see what's happening. Or they might have somebody that kind of moves the camera or something like that. Whereas I can be down on the field, I can be down on the basketball court, I can be down on the volleyball court and get something a little closer. And there have been some times when we have done that, when maybe it's a playoff game 2 hours away and it's south of Decatur someplace and we just can't get there, but they're playing someplace and that school district's got a stream and we take it and that it's a good broadcast quality. That's usually the thing. Is it broadcast quality? Does it look good? Can you tell? Because sometimes a wide soccer field, somebody scores a goal and you're like, my goodness, what was that? Which is little ants out there. So that's usually it. They don't usually have replays and 2 or 3 cameras. Some of them do. Some of them have really slick productions, and we're able to get some of those. And the other thing is there's a company called Federation, National Federation High School. They actually oversee some of that, and there's a fee that you got to pay, and there's rights, and there's So there is some complication to that, but, and not everybody does stream. Not everybody does, but some of them do, and some of them will make the air. Sometimes that really helps us, especially if it's a game we can't get to, a couple hours away, kind of thing. Good question, though. Yes.
So if you're hitting one game first half, second game second half, this might be a silly question, but how do you get the final stats and scores? Do you call the coaches?
Yeah, that's a good
Or do they
question.
have-
Yeah, sometimes an athletic director, a lot of times, athletic directors, I will text. We have good athletic directors in our area. Sometimes I'm texting them at 10 minutes past 10, going, I still don't have your score from your 4:30 soccer game. What was the final score? Scores, sometimes statistics. Some are really good. Twitter has helped tremendously because a lot of coaches have Twitter accounts. The IVC volleyball team has a Twitter account, and they will put up their scores after the match, and it'll say that they beat, Sterling 25-21, 25-20, and they might even include a couple of stats. So-and-so had this many kills, so-and-so had that many assists. Some of them are great about that. And other times, it's just a score, and that's fine, as long as we can get the score. But yes, I'm rarely there, unless it's a playoff game, I'm rarely there at the end. And so we're relying on another source to get us that score, and a lot of times it's somebody from the school. There are some people that are the scorebook people that have the scorebook, and sometimes they'll send me a picture of the scorebook. Oh, those are great, because I never know. When I leave, like at a basketball game, I might have 7 or 8 baskets, and I'm not quite sure which ones I'm going to use on the highlights. And then I get back and I edit them, and it's not always the leading scorer. So it's nice if I have the whole scorebook and I can say, oh, this person only scored 6 points, but I've got one of their baskets and it was a nice basket, and I'm going to use that. Although the leading scorer had 17 points, if I have that. That doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes we get help from school that way. Yeah. Or a key volunteer. Sometimes I've gotten texts from moms and dads that are in the stadium, that are at the game. I'll see them if I know them. I'll text me the score as I'm leaving, and just because of that, like these 8:00 games on Friday night, I hope they're finals by 10:20, but they might not be. So we might not have scores until Saturday. We'll get the scores, but we get challenged that way sometimes. A very good question, though. Are we doing good on time? Oh, it's already 1:05? All right, well, thank you. This is great. I hope I didn't put anybody to sleep. And Jason's coming up here, so I better leave.